From people who were trapped by boulders and had to do unspeakable things to get free, to sailors who had to survive shark-infested waters, and more, here are 9 people who got stuck in terrifying places. Number 9. Trapped under the ice. TikTok influencer Jason Clark spent 40 seconds trapped under the ice on Bear Lake in Utah when he tried to have his girlfriend film a viral video of him swimming from one hole in the ice to another. He became disoriented and lost his clear vision because the water was so cold and sent his body into shock. He became unable to determine the location of the hole and started trying to break the thick ice with his back. He failed to shatter the ice and got very close to dying. Miraculously, he found the exit hole at the last moment and surfaced, gasping for air. This is one of the first times that a social media influencer has tried to swim under the ice to generate buzz and fame, but it's not the first time that anyone has come close to perishing under a layer of ice in chilly water. It's actually more common than you'd think that people fall through the ice and become trapped there, quickly succumbing as their bodies lose energy and go into shock. Be very careful when walking on an ice-covered pond. You don't know how sturdy the ice is. Number 8. The elevator. At first, the idea of being stuck in an elevator might not seem that bad. After all, people travel in them all the time. But that's a false sense of security speaking to you, because if you really think about it, an elevator is basically a small metal box that goes up and down, and if something goes wrong, it can take quite a long time to go and get out of it, as Nicolas White found out in 1999. It was a regular workday at his job at the McGraw-Hill building in New York City. He went and took a smoke break, and then took the express elevator to get to the 43rd floor. And that's where things went wrong, because on this particular journey up, the elevator suddenly stopped on the 13th floor, and it didn't move again. Now, in times when this happens, you'd think that there was an emergency phone or warning button to let someone on the outside know that he was stuck. Except there wasn't. What's more, the escape hatch at the top of the elevator was locked, and opening the doors just revealed a cement slab of concrete, as the express elevator doesn't stop until it gets to higher floors. To White, he was not only trapped, he could have been in serious danger, because if that elevator had dropped, it would have killed him more than likely. Even more horrifying, though, was that there was a camera in the elevator, and no one noticed for 41 hours that there was a man inside trying to get out. By the time he was freed, it was a very long ordeal, and he sued his former company for their incompetence in regards to the security guards not realizing he was there for so long. After years of court battles, they eventually reached a settlement. Have you ever been stuck in an elevator? For how long? What happened? Tell me your story in the comments section below. Then remember to subscribe to The Biggest if you haven't already for more exciting videos. Number 7. The USS Indianapolis. It was near the end of World War II in 1945, and the plans were in place to drop the atomic bombs on Japan. But the uranium needed to be transported to a certain site close to Japan. The USS Indianapolis was assigned that job. They completed that job, and after a brief stop in Guam, were shipped out again in the Philippine Sea. That's when they met a Japanese submarine who sank the ship. But that wasn't the end of the story. That was the beginning for the hundreds who survived the attack by the sub. But the problem was for them that no one knew where they were, and they were very far from land. What's more, they weren't alone in the waters. These men were stuck in an ocean that was full of sharks, and those sharks were circling them and were very hungry. Many of the crew were in a panicked state to the point that they were attracting the sharks to them, and thus they were slowly picked off one by one. The sharks were noted to be relentless, and this went on for 4 days without food or water, and being baked by the sun. Eventually, a routine plane sweep of the area led to the survivors being found. Sadly, there weren't too many, and the dead outnumbered the living, but they were alive. Rescue operations went into the night, but those who made it were brought back home. Number 6. Copiapo Mining Incident. One of the most well-known and televised incidents of people getting stuck happened in Chile, South America, via the Copiapo mining incident. This happened in 2010, and it featured 33 men at a mine site when a collapse happened, and all of them were trapped 2,300 feet underground with no clear way out, and it took rescuers 69 days to go and free them. dangers of this event were well documented. The biggest peril, of course, was that there was a risk of running out of food, water, and oxygen, as well as the fact that the mine could have collapsed on them and killed them all. Thankfully, they were in a shelter, so while still in danger, they were in the best position to survive. 3 separate drilling rig teams, nearly every Chilean government ministry, the United States' space agency, NASA, and a dozen corporations from around the world cooperated in completing the rescue. A sad fact about this incident was that the mine was notorious for not following safety regulations and protecting their workers. There had been various cave-ins and worker deaths in the years before this mining accident. Millions of people watched around the world as the miners were eventually freed, but as for the mining company, no charges were filed against them. Number 5. Trapped in quarantine. The year 2020 was hard for many. One of the biggest reasons for that was the fact that the global pandemic that occurred forced a global lockdown. So for some people, they couldn't go home and were stuck in places that weren't the best places to visit long term. That's what happened with Bill Dobbin, a resident of the UK who found himself stuck in Colombia in South America for 2 months before working out a way to fly back home. It was not exactly easy, the Derbyshire County Council worker said. He had to stay at a hotel during the lockdown in Colombia, but because of the various issues the lockdown caused, he had to cook his own food as the staff were sent home. Back in the UK, when his neighbors hadn't heard from him in a while, they sent a note to his mailbox. But when he didn't respond, they called the police, and the police went and called him to ensure he was alright. By the time May had come around, he was still unsure if he would get home because of the touch-and-go nature of things, and even when he was confirmed to have a flight, it still wasn't easy. The taxi took about 20 minutes because the police pulled us over and wanted my ID and permit, he said. I arrived at the airport at 9:30 a.m. on May 4th. The repatriation flight was at 10 p.m. When I arrived at the airport, the staff said that no one could enter until 4 p.m. when the British Embassy staff arrived. So I sat on the pavement outside in the massive heat with no toilets or access to food or drink unless you took your luck and went to find some. So in total, I spent 7.5 hours outside. He did make it home, but as he noted, it was not an easy thing. Number 4. Soviet 613 submarine escape. During the height of the Cold War, many nations were making submarines to prepare for the inevitable next conflict. For the Soviet Union, this included the Soviet Project 613 submarine, which was doing a test in Arctic waters when something went horribly wrong. It started when they were doing a test of a torpedo launch when it didn't fire. Thinking that the round was a dud, they left it in the pod and commenced training. Not long after, the shell did indeed explode, but it was inside the vessel when it did. As such, it sank the vessel deep into the water towards what seemed like certain doom. Panic reigned on the ship as the chain of command broke down quickly. However, another crewman established it via brandishing a pistol and firing shots to get everyone under control. Once mostly calm, they donned special suits and went to the remaining empty torpedo tube in order to use it to get out and slowly rise to the surface. Though the 17 were all rescued according to reports, it wasn't a flawless victory. Many of the men went to the surface too quickly and thus had decompression sickness as well as damaged lungs. But they did survive, and once the Cold War was over, they were able to tell their story, and they admitted that it was basically a miracle that they made it out like they did. Number 3. Bank vault. Despite what you might be thinking, no, this wasn't a case of robbers being trapped in a vault that they were trying to rob. Rather, it was a 91-year-old woman who got trapped in that vault. It started out as a standard venture as the woman was escorted to the vault to look at a deposit box she had, and the bank attendant locked the vault so that she could check it out in privacy. The problem was that the attendant forgot she was there, and thus she was trapped in there for the rest of the day. What's more, they turned off the lights in the vault, leaving her stranded, and she didn't have any way of contacting the outside to let them know her predicament. The only reason she was freed from the vault in a timely fashion was that her son got worried after not hearing from her, called the police, and they figured out she last visited the bank. She went into that bank on a Monday and didn't get out until Tuesday. Given her age, it was a miracle she only left the bank with a slight case of dehydration. Number 2. Solitary confinement cell. Daniel Chong's getting stuck story is one that is a tragedy on every level and almost cost him his life due to no fault of his own. You see, he was at a friend's house, a house that had drugs in it, and the police raided the house, and all of the people inside were arrested, including Chong. The police eventually determined that he was a bystander, just visiting the home, and thus he was put into solitary confinement so he could be handled later. On the surface, that's fine, except they forgot he was there, and thus left him alone with no food, water, or bathroom breaks for 4 days. That's not just dangerous, that's a breakdown in the system. Eventually, the guards realized something was up, and they opened the cell to find Chong's nearly destroyed body and mind. He was rushed to the hospital and spent 5 days recovering from dehydration, kidney failure, cramps, and a perforated esophagus. He was also 15 pounds lighter. The DEA issued an apology and gave Chong a $4 million settlement for his troubles. Number 1. Aaron Ralston. Aaron Ralston is arguably one of the more famous survival stories of recent times, and there's a very good reason for that, given what he had to go through in order to make it through a rather harrowing ordeal. In 2003, Ralston was hiking alone in Blue John Canyon in Canyonlands National Park in southeast Utah. He was doing some climbing and descending down rocks and canyons when his arm got pinned by a boulder that fell on him. 5 days passed, and he had nothing but water and the snacks that he had with him to survive, yet he did. He felt there was a chance that someone might find him, but there were 2 problems with that hope. The biggest of which was that he didn't tell anyone where he was going in the canyon. The place he was at was very remote. After running out of supplies and knowing that no one would come, he did something very extreme. He amputated his own arm in order to get free and walk back to his truck. A family found him on the way there and were able to get him some help. This tale of incredible survival was eventually turned into the film 127 Hours and starred James Franco. But while the tale is inspirational, it's also a warning to climbers like him to make sure they let people know where they're going and have a system of communication to ensure that someone knows they're in danger, even if they're unreachable. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these stories of survival and danger? Do you know of other survival stories of those who got stuck in terrifying places? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and get ready for more intense videos. See you next time!